The BRICS nations are looking to de-dollarize, and many countries around the world have already started doing so. Even though the United States has the most powerful military in the world, it doesn't have the economic power to back up its influence anymore. This is why the BRICS bloc is planning to introduce their own currency, which would be backed by gold. And this would effectively challenge the supremacy of the US dollar. And if the BRICS bloc gets big enough, it will truly be unstoppable. So in today's video, we talk about why BRICS will outnumber G7 nations 2-1 by 2030. And check out this crazy prediction made by the economist Peter Zion that might shock you. But before we start, make sure to give us a thumbs up to stay up to date with the most important news. In 2022, President Xi Jinping of China proposed a new development bank for the BRICS bloc. The bank would allow them to lend money to developing countries in order to fund infrastructure projects. What this means is that the BRICS bloc wants to take control of the flow of money around the world. This is the first step to creating a common currency. The new development bank is an alternative to the IMF and the World Bank. These organizations are controlled by the Western governments, and they use their power to enforce neoliberal policies on countries around the world. The Washington Consensus has been very successful over the past few decades, but now the tables are turning and the global South is rising. They don't want to be told what to do by the West anymore, and they want to have more of a say in how the world is run. And that's why they're forming alliances with countries that share similar values. BRICS members have already started to coordinate more closely together. They held their first foreign ministers meeting in 2021, and it was decided that these meetings would be held annually. There's also talks of holding a BRICS summit every year. In this environment, it is not surprising that BRICS countries are planning to create their own trade network. We all know that global trade relies heavily on the dollar, but the BRICS bloc wants to change that. If the BRICS bloc gets big enough, it will eventually become the majority of the world's population. And if that happens, the world needs to take notice. The leader of this new world order would be China. It has the world's second largest economy, and it is the only major power that hasn't been affected by the global financial crisis. While other economies were crippled by lockdowns, China's economy continued growing. In fact, it was the only major economy to grow last year when the whole world was in recession. This is why everyone from Russia to Brazil is turning towards China. It has the resources and the know-how to lift millions out of poverty, and this is what the developing world needs. They need practical solutions and help to improve their people's lives. They don't care about human rights or democracy. All they care about is results. The main reason why the Global South is joining the BRICS bloc is because they had enough of being exploited. For too long, Western companies have moved their manufacturing overseas in order to save money. And this has resulted in the wealthier countries getting richer, while the poorer countries stayed poor. Millions of jobs were created in China and other Asian countries, but these jobs paid pennies compared to what workers in the West were paid. For example, there are more than 75 Fortune 500 companies in China now. But if we look at the list, most of these companies rely on cheap labor in order to sell their products at a competitive price. And this includes some of the biggest brands in the world, such as Apple, Nike, Zara, H&M, and Disney. Over the past few decades, these Western brands have moved their production to places like Bangladesh, Vietnam, Cambodia, and Sri Lanka. This way, they could sell their products for a fraction of the cost, while still making billions in profits. But this is coming to an end now because the Global South is rising, and they want higher wages for their workers. This is what makes the BRICS bloc so dangerous for the West. The combined population of the BRICS nations is almost 4 billion people, which is 52% of the world's total population. And if we include the countries that have applied to join the bloc, then that number rises to over 6 billion, which is over 75% of the world's population. If the BRICS bloc becomes big enough, they will become unstoppable. And this is why the West is worried. The BRICS bloc consists of 4 large developing economies plus 1 developed economy. The 4 developing economies are Brazil, Russia, India, and China. And they're all in different stages of industrialization. Brazil is the most similar to the West, has a large consumer market, but it also has a lot of natural resources. That's why it's considered a frontier economy. Russia is in a different stage of industrialization compared to Brazil. It has a highly skilled workforce and plenty of natural resources, but its consumer market is small. That's why it's considered a raw material-oriented economy. India is also a developing economy with a large consumer market and plenty of natural resources. It's considered a late industrializer because it has a lot of poverty and inequality. Then we have China, which is the most developed out of the four. Its consumer market is huge and it's very advanced in technology, but it lacks natural resources. That's why it's considered a catching-up economy. South Africa was the fifth BRIC added to the group in 2010. It has plenty of natural resources, but its economy is underdeveloped due to inequality and corruption. That's why it's considered a resource-dependent economy. There are now 6 countries that have applied to join the bloc, but it seems unlikely that they will get accepted anytime soon. These countries are Argentina, Algeria, Egypt, Iran, Mexico, and Turkey. The BRICS bloc is likely to continue expanding because each new member will bring in new ideas and capital to the group. Now here's the thing. The BRICS bloc is much more than just an economic alliance. It's a political and security alliance too. That's why many countries in the Middle East and Africa are interested in joining. They want to protect themselves against Western hegemony. That's why countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE are starting to accept the Chinese yuan. By doing this, they're hedging against the decline of the US dollar. And this is happening all over the world. For example, China has been buying a lot of oil from Russia in order to bypass Western sanctions. And this has resulted in China becoming Russia's largest trading partner. In the near future, we should expect more countries to follow in their footsteps. As more countries de-dollarize, it will accelerate the collapse of the US dollar. It will also cause the Western bloc to fracture, since the countries in Europe depend on the dollar just as much as the Americans do. By 2030, we can expect the BRICS bloc to outnumber the G7 nations 2-1. We can also expect more countries to join the bloc by then. We all know that most of the innovation in the world comes from Asia. That's why it's no surprise that South Korea is interested in joining. In the past, South Korea was heavily reliant on the United States, but over the years, it has been distancing itself from the West. Since the end of the Cold War, South Korea has grown into a powerhouse of innovation. Companies like Samsung, Hyundai, Kia, LG, POSCO, they wouldn't be where they are today without the help of the American market. But South Korea also helped the United States in return. They provided cheap labor and resources that allowed American companies to manufacture their products at a competitive price. But South Korea's role as the cheap manufacturer is coming to an end. Now it's one of the most technologically advanced economies in the world. And this is why it's trying to join the BRICS bloc. It wants to work with countries that are at a similar stage of development. This way it can move up the value chain and create even more innovative products. Another country that's distancing itself from the West is the UAE. It's one of the largest oil producers in the world, but it also has plans to go green. That's why it's investing heavily in renewable energy. In fact, by 2050, the entire country will be powered by clean energy. The UAE sees China as a great opportunity and wants to export clean energy to one of the fastest-growing economies in the world. And this is why the UAE is so interested in joining the BRICS bloc, and it's not alone. There are dozens of other countries that are looking to break away from the West and forge their own path. As more countries join the BRICS bloc, we should expect the US dollar to lose even more value. And this is when the tables will truly turn. After all, if the BRICS bloc gets big enough, it will literally represent the majority of the world. Now here's something that you probably didn't expect. According to the economist Peter Zion, by 2040, there will be a new world order. He believes that the BRICS bloc will replace the G7 nations and become the most powerful bloc in the world. He believes that this will happen because the West will and be able to contain China's growth. Here's the thing. According to Zion, the US isn't declining, but it's the rest of the world that's rising. He believes that the developing world will industrialize and become rich, while the West stays poor. That's why by 2040, we can expect the BRICS bloc to outnumber the G7 nations 2-1. What do you guys think? Will the BRICS bloc become the new world order? Comment below.